Meanwhile, in Israel, a special session to discuss the remaining Israeli captives held in Gaza is taking place at Parliament. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has again said that ending the conflict will not help secure the release of the captives.
We won't succeed in freeing all the hostages without military pressure. Military pressure, operational pressure and political pressure. And one thing we won't do, we will not stop the war.
Let's bring in our correspondent, Alan Fisher. He's joining us live from occupied East Jerusalem. We're hearing that Netanyahu was heckled by some family members of captives. Alan, what's been happening at the Knesset?
Well, the families took their positions in the public gallery and they produced their own homemade banners, many of them just saying the word now. They want the captives released, not in a week, not in 2 weeks, but right now. And they want the government to do more to secure that. When Benjamin Netanyahu spoke, he talked about how they need more time. Someone from the public gallery shouted, "We don't have time." And he said that the war will continue because he believes that putting pressure on Hamas gives them a better window of opportunity to try and secure the release of captives. Now, this came just hours after he made a visit to Gaza, only the second in the last 80 days. He visited troops on the ground there, and of course this is coming as the number of Israeli dead is increasing. And he said that the war will go on. Now, given that Yahya Sinwar, who's the head of Hamas in Gaza, has made his first public comment since October the 7th, and he said there will be no ceasefire until Israel stops its war, it would appear that this war is going to continue for some considerable time, and the death toll is going to rise considerably higher.
And Alan, 156 Israeli soldiers have now been killed since Israel began its ground invasion. Is that mounting death toll among Israeli troops eroding public support for the war at all?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu says he's spoken to the families of those who've died while serving Israel, and he said that they had asked him to make sure that their son's death was not in vain. He said for that reason the war must continue. Now, the Israelis have suffered significant losses over the last 72 hours or so, and there have been no recent polls. But the last poll suggested that the Israeli public, well, maybe not 100% behind Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, his approval rating is at an all-time low. They are still behind the idea of the war, still behind the idea of defeating Hamas in Gaza, and still behind the idea of the Israeli army being in Gaza to carry out those jobs. But of course, there is concern that the whole idea of the war was to try and release the captives. And if the captives aren't being released and the number of soldiers dead is increasing, then where is Benjamin Netanyahu heading with his policy of trying to defeat trying to defeat Hamas, release the captives and win the war?
Alan, thank you very much for that. That's our correspondent, Alan Fisher, live in occupied East Jerusalem.